Have you ever stopped to, truly consider what words like freedom and democracy actually mean?
They're huge concepts, aren't they? Powerful ideas.
Exactly. And they get invoked all over the world, but how people understand them, how they experience them, that can vary quite a bit depending on culture, politics.
Right. The lived reality can be very different from the textbook definition.
So our mission in this deep dive is to try and unpack these really complex concepts for you.
Where are we starting?
We're going to journey from some pretty foundational international declarations, think the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right through to recent, on-the-ground insights from citizens in Africa.
Okay, so bridging the global principles with local perspective.
Precisely. And along the way, challenge some maybe long-held assumptions about regional values. We've got a few key sources we're drawing on.
Ah, yes. What are we looking at?
There's a textual analysis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights itself, then a big report from Afrobarometer on democratic views in Africa.
Oh, Afrobarometer, yes.
Yeah.
Very important work.
And finally, a really thought-provoking lecture by Amartya Sen. He talks about human rights and this idea of so-called Asian values.
Okay, this sounds like a fascinating mix.
So let's kick things off by unpacking the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR.
The big one.
Yeah. And what's kind of remarkable, maybe even surprising, is how this document, despite its legal background, it's achieved almost a biblical status in some places.
Particularly in the West, among educated groups.
Exactly, which suggests it's way more than just a legal text. It's become this incredibly important cultural signifier. It's deeply embedded, really, shaping how we even talk about rights.
Mm-hmm. And it helps to remember the context, the historical backdrop. The UDHR wasn't created in a vacuum.
No, definitely not.
It was born directly, really, from the absolute atrocities of World War II. We're talking the Holocaust, genocide, crimes against humanity.
Unimaginable horrors.
Right. So in 1948, the goal was to establish basic, fundamental rights for everyone, everywhere. But its roots go even deeper.
Deeper than WWII.
Oh, absolutely. Philosophically, you can trace lines back to the Renaissance, focus on individual dignity, Roman law, even those 17th century debates about natural rights, Locke, Rousseau.
Ah, okay. So their ideas are woven into it.
You can definitely see their influence in the text, yes.
And I suppose it's that historical weight, that philosophical lineage that gives the UDHR its incredible, power of the text.
It's not just the words on the page.
No. It's the interpretations, the endless references to it, direct and indirect, and so many other treaties, national laws. It's really developed a life beyond itself, almost. Taken on a life of its own.
It really has. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How does a document written by, a committee, essentially.
Right, a group of people.
How does it gain such immense power, almost separate from its creators? That idea of the death of the authors.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, you had key figures involved, like Eleanor Roosevelt, Rene Cassin, P.C. Chang, Charles Melick, very influential people. Yeah. But the text itself, it's acquired this. This authority and an existence far away from and superior to its original drafters. It's become, you might say, super textual.
Meaning it exists beyond its original context.
Exactly, like a foundational myth.
Yeah.
It's quite telling that, few educated people, even in the West, could actually name the specific authors.
That's a really interesting point. But, okay, digging into those origins, there's a critical perspective we need to address. Many scholars point out a pretty clear Western or maybe Northern bias in the drafting process.
The representation issue?
Yeah, think about it. When it was being written, the entire continent of Africa had just one representative, Egypt.
Wow, only one.
And indigenous peoples, minorities, no representation at all. So even though it talks about equality in broad terms, that very language coming from that limited perspective can paradoxically end up silencing certain groups. Women's perspectives, for instance, were largely absent.
And that connects to a kind of dual irony when you look at the philosophy underpinning it.
Oh.
Well, you have a declaration created by a collection of nations, ostensibly to protect individuals.
Right.
But what it ends up promoting is a very specific, liberal, individualist worldview. And that can clash quite fundamentally with societies and cultures built more around collectivism.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about the right to own property or the right to rest in leisure with pay.
Okay.
For someone living in deep poverty or someone unemployed, these rights might mean very little. So by focusing on these specific values, which are arguably quite Western and economically focused, The document kind of unintentionally entrenches a Western, relatively wealthy male norm.
Which leads some people to argue that the UDHR isn't just about ideals, it actually functions as a mechanism of political power or disempowerment.
It brings to mind Edward Said's point, doesn't it?
About narrative.
Exactly, that the power to narrate, or maybe even more crucially, the power to prevent or block other narratives. That's fundamental to cultural influence. Control the story, control the agenda.
So the UDHR becomes the story of rights.
In many ways, yes. And another fascinating angle here is the language itself, the formal tone, the legalese.
You mean the specific legal jargon?
Precisely. That actually seems to contribute to its almost sacred status. It's this peculiar blend of formal structure and legalese, combined with superficial and philosophically based statements.
Which sounds complicated.
It is, but it gives it a flexible kind of power. Some parts might not be, practically or literally intelligible on Earth in a direct, everyday sense.
Yeah.
But that very ambiguity, that room for interpretation, that might be its greatest strength. It lets it be reinterpreted in totally new situations, virgin contexts, while somehow still holding on to its core authority.
That's counterintuitive, but makes a strange kind of sense.
Oh.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit from these foundational texts and critiques.
To the present day.
Yeah, let's look at the contemporary realities, especially democracy in Africa. For a long time, there was this sort of conventional wisdom.
That Africans didn't prioritize democracy, that development came first.
Exactly. But this research network, Afrobarometer, they started back in 1999. They've pretty much effectively debunked that whole idea.
Their data is really compelling on this.
So what's the main takeaway?
The key finding, and it's powerful, is that Africans continue to demand democracy even in the face of diminishing supply.
Demand is still high, even if delivery is lacking.
Right. Back in 2005, support was maybe wide but shallow. Now, the evidence suggests it's become narrower but deeper. You still see strong majorities across the continent backing core democratic norms.
Like what specifically?
Things like competitive elections, limits on presidential terms, freedom for the media. About 2/3 say they prefer democracy over any other system. And even bigger majorities reject one-man rule, one-party systems, military rule.
And there was that striking finding about accountability, right?
Oh, yes. This might surprise you, especially given, the real needs for basic public services on the continent. A clear and growing majority, about 6 out of 10 Africans, now say it is more important for a government to be accountable to the people than to get things done.
Wow. Accountability over just pure effectiveness, that's a significant finding.
It signals a real desire for responsiveness, for transparency, not just development at any cost.
But it's not all positive news, is it? There are some concerning trends in the data, too.
No, definitely not. Over the last decade, overall support for democracy has actually dipped by about 7 percentage points across 30 countries they surveyed.
Okay, a noticeable decline.
And maybe more worrying, opposition to military rule has weakened quite a bit by 11 points.
Opposition weakened. Why would that be?
Well, here's a striking statistic. More than half of Africans, 53%, are willing to tolerate military intervention.
Tolerate military intervention.
When elected leaders abuse power for their own ends. And interestingly, this feeling is stronger among younger people. 56% of youth compared to 47% of those over 55.
So a potential willingness to accept undemocratic means if democracy itself is seen as corrupt or failing?
That seems to be the implication. Which leads us right into what Afrobarometer calls the supply-side failure.
Meaning the delivery of democracy isn't meeting the demand?
Precisely. Fewer than half, only 45%, actually see their own countries as mostly or fully democratic. And even fewer, just 37%, are satisfied with how democracy is working day to day.
And you mentioned drops, even in places considered democratic strongholds.
Yeah, we've seen significant drops in satisfaction even in places like Botswana and South Africa, countries often held up as examples.
So the big question then is, why? Is it just economic hardship driving this dissatisfaction, people struggling to get by?
That's what you might assume, right? But the Afrobarometer data suggests something more nuanced. Declining satisfaction with democracy is linked to both economic and political factors. People are less satisfied if the economy's bad and if governance is poor.
Okay, that makes sense.
But, and this is key, declining support for the idea of democracy seems surprisingly resilient to economic problems like poverty.
So people still believe in democracy even when they're struggling economically?
Largely, yes. Instead, the drop in support is most closely tied to adverse changes in political performance.
Meaning bad governance.
Exactly. Things like rising corruption in local government, poor quality elections, a perceived lack of presidential accountability. Those are the things that really erode fundamental support for the democratic system itself.
Can you give examples?
Well, look at South Africa again. Support for democracy dropped a huge 29 points over the decade. Mali, 23 points. These are linked to perceived political failings.
But it's not universal decline.
Not at all. You have countries like Zambia and Senegal showing really strong, steady support. And Zambia even saw a big jump in satisfaction after their 2021 election, which was seen as a positive step. So political performance really matters.
Okay, that distinction between satisfaction and support and the link to political performance is crucial. Let's shift perspective again from the practicalities back to the philosophical side.
Where are we heading now?
To that debate around Asian values, using Amartya Sen's analysis. You often hear this argument, right? That Asian values inherently put order and discipline above individual freedom.
And it's frequently used to justify authoritarian styles of government in parts of Asia.
Exactly. So how does Sen respond to that?
Well, he really unpacks it critically. First, he says there's actually little general evidence that authoritarian governance is really beneficial in encouraging economic development.
He challenges the economic justification.
Right. He points to democratic Botswana, for instance, one of the fastest growing economies globally for decades, all within a democratic framework. So the link isn't clear-cut at all.
What else?
He also argues that just lumping everything under Asian values is, frankly, extremely crude. Asia is incredibly diverse.
Of course. Vastly different cultures, histories.
Precisely. He uses Japan as an example, where you have millions identifying with both Shintoism and Buddhism, their practices often overlapping in one person's life. It's complex, it's diverse, not some monolithic block.
So this whole idea of Asian values as inherently anti-freedom, Sen says it's a gross oversimplification.
Absolutely. And more than that, he provides compelling historical examples from Asian traditions that show a long history of thinking about tolerance and freedom.
Like what?
Well, think about Emperor Ashoka in India, way back in the 3rd century BCE. His rule emphasized non-injury and real respect for different religious groups. He famously said, people shouldn't just praise their own sect and put down others without good reason.
That's ancient history showing tolerance.
Exactly. Or fast forward to the 16th century, Mughal Emperor Akbar, also in India, he actively promoted religious tolerance, even letting people who'd been forcibly converted switch back to their original faith.
So these aren't new Western imports.
Not at all. Sen argues these examples, plus the emphasis in Buddhism on things like freedom, volition, and free choice, directly challenge this idea that the basic ideas underlying freedom and rights are exclusively Western or somehow alien to Asia.
That's a really important corrective.
And he even points out that the idea of equality of freedom, that everyone matters and deserves similar freedom, that's actually a relatively recent development, even in Western thought. It's not like the West had it all figured out centuries ago either.
So the history is much more global, much more intertwined than the simple West versus East narrative allows.
Precisely.
And Sen had a critique of how Western governments engage with this too, didn't he?
Yes, he calls it a paper tiger approach to human rights abroad.
Meaning?
Meaning lots of strong talk, lots of rhetoric about human rights. But when it comes down to it, particularly in dealings with Asian countries, commerce and business interests often seem to take priority over actually pushing for issues of freedom.
So actions not matching words.
Often, yes. It's far from a consistent promotion of those values globally.
Okay. So as we start to bring all these threads together from this deep dive, what's the big picture?
Well, it seems clear that while you have these foundational documents, like the UDHR, setting out universal ideals of freedom and rights.
Ideals that are powerful.
Very powerful. But how they're interpreted, how they're realized or not realized, that's deeply shaped by different cultural contexts, by evolving political situations on the ground.
It's not static. It's a living, breathing thing, constantly being debated and fought over.
Absolutely. And that core tension we kept seeing. It's persistent, isn't it? This consistent global demand for democracy and human rights.
Coming up against those supply-side failures.
Exactly. Failures in actual governance. And the Afrobarometer data really underscores that the well of democratic support isn't bottomless.
People's patience isn't infinite.
Right. Governments can't just rely on, say, economic performance to keep people on board. They really need to address the political failings. The corruption, the poor elections, the lack of accountability, that's what erodes trust in the system itself. Political performance is critical.
So we leave you, our listener, with maybe a final provocative thought to mull over. How do your own background, your own inherited interpretive traditions, shape how you understand concepts like freedom and human rights in our really interconnected world today?
A self-reflection prompt.
Yeah, and maybe thinking about the gap we've discussed between democratic aspirations and their practical delivery. What role might you play wherever you are in trying to bridge that gap?